Somebody mentioned the WWE. We talked about the WWE network deal, right? And how it obviously the guys who have already been shorted on royalties and now in pay-per-view bonuses because there's no such a thing anymore as pay-per-view bonuses, and whatever. And it's devalued the concept of paying for a big match, and it's devalued somewhat paying for any kind of wrestling when you can get everything ever done by the biggest company and the biggest library in the world for $5 a month or whatever. And oh my gosh, I even had a couple people email me. They were specifically hot about, well, I just have a business background, and you obviously just don't understand that this is going to be more profitable for the company and blah, blah, blah. And the reason that, yes, brainiacs, did we in any part of that discussion, Brian, deny that the WWE was going to make money off the deal? Actually, wasn't that the point? The WWE is going to make money off the deal, and the boys are getting fucked.
That was the exact point. Yeah.
That was the exact point. Because somebody said, well, Cornette, you lived 30 years ago. You think people are going to buy DVDs again? That's the DVD sales. No, you knuckleheads, you nattering nabobs of negativity. No, I say. Fucking point is not what they're getting paid on, because they got paid on VHSs. I don't expect anybody to get paid on VHSs anymore because they changed to DVDs. And then they got paid on DVDs. Well, if people ain't buying DVDs anymore, I don't expect them to get paid on that. But are they getting paid on the network? Every time you order the same show on the network that you would have bought on VHS or on DVD, are they getting paid? No, because you ain't paying as much, and they ain't paying anything. And I know it's not up to the mathematics, because the statements that you get, Brian, the royalties from the WWE, royalty statements, and I've been getting these for 27 years now. They break down, for example, if you were on the greatest matches of The Undertaker, right? Well, on your royalty statement, that's a computer printout, they will write greatest matches of The Undertaker. They will have the total amount of those DVDs or units, whatever, sold. They will have the total gross money that they derived from that. They will have the code number of that particular DVD or item in their shop on that. And it's not just all of them. They break down the direct arena sales, which of course there aren't anymore, but they break down the direct arena sales. And then they break down the sales to other DVD companies and bulk sales, and they say retail sales. All this shit's broken down in different columns and everything. And they also have your royalty rate for each of those releases and the amount total of royalties that you get. So if I was on one of the matches of 12 matches of The Undertaker's greatest matches, is managing one of his opponents, and they count up all of the talent in that entire release, and they have assigned them, due to their contracts or just a standard calculation, a royalty rate. So, and if you're just minor, and then they actually go back, and I found this out when I fucking questioned them about the World's Greatest Managers DVD that I didn't get royalties on, and then later did after it was questioned. They've count up how much time you're on the fucking screen and shit. And then if it's a WCW clip, they just bought that outright. You don't get any royalties on that whatsoever. But if it's a WWF library, because of your contracts and etc., you would have to get royalties. But the royalty rate could be 0.0264, which means if they grossed $75,000 on that Undertaker DVD, then your royalty rate being that small, you might end up getting $3.27 off of it, right? But it's all broken down. So the point I was going to make is I can't believe they can't do the math on how many times those same things get played on the network. You follow? Are you smelling what I'm cooking?
Yeah.
How many times people watch those things? Is there not some talent pool? As they used to say back, they used to have a talent pool where contract guys that didn't get booked on the house show that they ran, if they were left off back in the 90s, the Attitude Era, business was doing well, they would put a certain percentage of the gross of that house show into the talent pool, and guys would get $100 or $75 or $200 or whatever, even if they weren't on the show because they weren't booked. Talent, but there's some way that some of those guys could be deriving some income if they tried hard enough. And by the way, the Madusa royalty check story, I haven't told that one in a while. I'll come back to the point of this whole thing in a minute. But I told you what information they give, right? So best of Jim Cornette, total units sold 5 million, right? Total gross 7 million. Your royalty rate fucking 0.0002. Your fucking royalty $5.14, right? And then down at the bottom it would total everything. Well, Madusa hadn't worked for him for like 10 or 12 years, but she tweeted one day, "Hey, great royalty check I just got." And she had taken a picture of it where it said, it had her name, and you could tell that it was a royalty statement, but she cropped off the last 2 or 3 columns. So it looked like that they had paid her the gross that all the things that she was on had earned. It was like $225,000 for a 3-month period. And everybody was losing their shit. I said, that is so good. I've got a stooge on it because elsewise nobody will ever know that's the funniest fucking thing anybody's ever done with one of those royalty statements. Anyway, yes, brainiacs, the WWE is making money. And somebody even said, yeah, well, the wrestlers should have it in their contracts. Well, they might have back in the old days when they had stars that guys like Barry Bloom were negotiating for, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, The Undertaker, even a John Cena from that generation, whatever. But now, since we know everybody just feels like they're fucking blessed and happy to be there because they are forced to say it on TV every fucking week, what's any of these guys going to say? Well, if you don't give me royalties on the network, then I ain't going to sign. Well, then fuck you. Go work for fucking Impact and get shot at your own wedding. Or go to fucking AEW and bounce around for a dwarf. They got no choice. Because there are no attraction. You think Brock Lesnar? Well, he got everything built in. He still gets royalties on video games and all the shit that he's been involved in at a high level, but he was making more per match than anybody ever. So he got it all built in, but he's the only guy that's got that kind of leverage anymore. And whether he does anything with them in the future remains to be seen. So the point is now it's the cast of Cirque du Soleil, literally, as we found out with old Reggie. It's the cast of Cirque du Soleil, and if one of their acrobats don't want to fucking just play ball for a flat rate, we'll get another acrobat. And besides that the boys, there's no incentive to make a major box office star anymore because there is no major box office. They think they can just do programming with a cast of characters. We're going to find out that programming with a cast of characters eventually still needs a star. Think of a fucking hit television program of the last 30 or 40 years, and you take away the main guy, and how often is it the same fucking thing? Besides that, from the fan standpoint, just mentally, the big fight has always been worth paying to see. And whether in the early days of wrestling and boxing, there were no sports arenas in the United States. They actually built outdoor wooden bleachers and stadiums to see the big wrestling matches and boxing matches. And then they'd tear them down afterwards because they did what they were set out to do. And then finally, as arenas started getting, to be a thing in the major markets, that helped the wrestling business along, but the object, whether it was boxing or wrestling, was always the big fight. In the early day, before it was to buy a ticket to see the live event because that's the only way you could. Then with television, for years, a big fight in any genre of combat sport was not seen on free TV until maybe a month after, and then the network would pay for it. But it was closed circuit. Ali and Frazier. The fucking world stopped to see them on closed circuit. And then the world stopped again to see them on Wide World of Sports a month later. And then closed circuit became a thing for wrestling. And then pay-per-view. I'm not saying everything, whether it's VHS or DVD or whatever form of video, whether it's buying live event tickets or closed circuit or then pay-per-view or stream or whatever, there certainly ought to be a way to be compensated for it for the boys. And also, there has to be some subliminal thought that this is something worth paying for. WrestleMania was something that was worth paying for. People would go to see it live and pay hundreds of dollars to get it. It was something then in modern times, thousands of dollars. But they would still pay $50 or $60 on pay-per-view because it was a big event. Now it's presented as a big event, and if you got Peacock, it's $5 a month for that and everything else that's ever been put on tape in wrestling. Which to me it may get more eyeballs, but it devalues in people's eyes the value of the actual event, the stars in the main event, their ability to sell tickets if they have any. And what is this worth? My God. If you could fuck Pamela Anderson for $5 a day, pretty soon you get sick and tired of fucking Pamela Anderson.
What about the wrestlers that never signed any contracts? Because there were no contracts. I mean, they have all that world-class stuff from like 82 up.
Oh, nobody gets anything on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's bullshit. I mean, no one who was on those shows ever thought one day someone's going to take these tapes and they're going to monetize them.
But here's the thing. It is bullshit in a moral fashion, but that's why I've never supported most of the people's efforts at lawsuits, because I knew they were doomed to fruition on royalties because... And knowing this because I paid attention, A, and B, because then I've run my own companies, many of the promotions had a stamp on the back of their paychecks that was in effect a release. When you endorsed your check and put it in the bank every week, you signed a release. For years, you signed a release at Atlanta TV, TBS at Techwood, the Saturday morning or Saturday night shows. It was the pay sheet. Old Charlie McGowan would go around, sign to get paid. If you signed, boom, then you got on the pay sheet, but you were also signing a release. I agree, my likeness, videotape, blah, blah, blah. Some promotions never did that. You never signed shit in Memphis, but guess what? They don't even own their shit now. There is no Library of Memphis, official Library of Memphis. It's what everybody was able to scrounge and save. But in most cases, I'm trying not to get too technical, and it was a work for hire when you endorsed your check or you signed these releases at TV or whatever. Even if you weren't a contract talent, you were performing a work for hire. You were acknowledging you were paid for it. You were giving up your right to royalties, whether you realized it or not, because they didn't go over that with you. And nobody back in those days paid two fucks. I did from the early 80s on because I was a home video freak, but I wasn't going to goddamn go up to Jimmy Crockett and say, well, now listen, I ain't going to sign this shit for reasons I believe we mentioned earlier in the program. He would have got another loudmouth manager rather than upset the fucking whole structure of the business at that point.
Here's the Midnight Express with J.D. Costello.
There you go. J.D. was right down the road in Greenville. But so that's the thing. And when WWF or WWE now bought WCW, they bought their intellectual property and all the paperwork, which included all the releases that everybody had signed. And even though WCW was paying royalties at that point to some of the talent, the whole thing is they've got a very convincing legal paperwork trail. You weren't going to, even when we were still getting royalties of significant amount in the WWF, you weren't going to get royalties on the shit from WCW unless you were, and I'm not saying that Steve Austin may not have had something like that put in his contract, or a few of the people that came over after that, but for the average rank and file, no. But they were still paying on the last modern method of selling home video, which was DVD, when all of a sudden the network came up and they stopped paying. Now they still pay on DVDs. They just don't sell any. So, no, I understand the WWE's making money, but the wrestlers aren't. The idea of being the main event in WrestleMania for the wrestlers has gone, the goal of that has gone from, because that is where you will make more money in one day for one match than anybody else ever has in wrestling, and certainly you ever have in wrestling. That was the goal, to now, oh, it's the main event of WrestleMania. Because, wow, that's prestigious. What? So anyway, I think it devalues everything. And people once again realize, yeah, you can get everything for $5 a fucking month. Except for Madusa. She's $225,000 a quarter.
But to that point, it used to be that the main event made WrestleMania draw. Now WrestleMania draws despite whatever the main event is.
Yeah. It's like, come see a movie. Well, what's it about? Who's in it? It doesn't matter. It's a movie.